mean, these parts that I was in, these are the places in America, the kind of white working class, ex-urban, small town Texas, ex-urban Dallas. These are the parts of America where people listen to country music and will talk very snobbily about how, you know, in the Bronx and New York and in the inner city and in Chicago, south side of Chicago, you know, all coded stuff about essentially black people.
Right. Being lazy.
And not having family, you know, all of this stuff. And you hear a lot of it. And it's laughable because their social fabric in these parts that I reported on is as bad or worse than anything that they are describing. And they listen to country music, but no one in this entire landscape is living country music values. It's almost like, you know, people in India listening to Bollywood music and all these fantasies about love defying all odds, but very few people in India love in a way that defies all odds.
Whereas country music, we tend to believe, is somehow more
it's
authentic.
Pastoral, you know, God, church, family. Family.
Yeah.
They talk a lot about family. I kept counting the number of cross stitches on people's walls. I went into all these houses. Everybody says cross stitch of, you know, the family is where all this stuff, right? But it's actually, it's a joke because in that social world, nobody has access to a family. And I said the other day at another event that, you know, we talk a lot about financial inequality, and there is a very real problem with it. But inequality in the access to semi-decent parents is by far, in my mind, the most important kind of vector of American inequality because you can't redistribute it. There's nothing you can do. I can't take good parenting from some people and give it to people with bad parents or non-existent parents. And this is a social universe where I don't think anybody I met had a family in any sense. It's not just that they had one parent instead of two. I mean, one would be pretty lucky in this situation. The social fabric is kind of this kaleidoscope of, you know, 3-month arrangements. You kind of live in this place with this person taking care of you, with this person paying for it, and then kaleidoscope. Yeah. And then another person's paying another house. And what shot do people have? What shot do children have with the kind of stress levels that they develop going through those systems?
I was recently on a panel in which someone has researched the history of hillbilly music, which in some ways was a forerunner to country music. And what became clear to me, I've been doing a lot of work on the history of New York City and trying to uncover the kind of Protestant work ethic and the Anglo-American Protestant culture that was here. And what became very clear in terms of the production of this idea of the hillbilly was that it emerged from New York. It's not like there were people out there who were hillbillies, but that New Yorkers began to project the bad Protestant self who was lazy, who was dysfunctional, who was not the disciplined work ethic. Max Weber wrote this book about the spirit of capitalism and the Protestant work ethic. So it's really the non-proper...
Weber will also be signing books
okay, great.
in the back after
This is my academic side coming out of me. Projecting out the bad, work ethic Protestant. And so in some ways the hillbilly was kind of a projection of New York, and then of course it becomes a national reality because the press and the sheet music and the culture is really produced out of New York, especially at that time. And in some ways people in those conditions begin to take on that identity as one option, and country music emerges out of the hillbilly identity. So in a sense, it is all Bollywood, right?
Yeah.
It's all Bollywood, and that we really are not aware of the way in which that kind of fantasy and musical version of that fantasy actually has played itself out in this country.
I think that's right, but it is the case also that in those places there has been a huge drop-off over the last generation in a bunch of different measures of social fabric, right? So like whether it's church attendance or divorce rates or any number of things. I mean, what's so interesting to me is in America, it's kind of the Sarah Palin phenomenon of this. America still has this very outdated sense of like the cities are kind of corrupt, loose morals, whatever, and pastoral America is the heartland, but it's actually not true. And you know, and the reason this is important, given these economic conditions, is it creates a situation, and this is the Stroman's reality, in which in every other in poor countries like Bangladesh, the less resources you have, generally, you tend to have more access to people. Communities, clans, families, some tradition, something that's a buffer because you don't have resources. The perverse situation here in a lot of these places is the more resources you have, the more community you have. People like us in this room, who probably have a lower divorce rate than poor people in America. The less resources you have, the less access to other people you have, the less leaning you have. And that just doesn't work. That's why I say it just compounds inequalities and makes them even more unbearable.